What's going on, everyone? Tayler Kyles and Mike Kadlick here for CLNS, coming at you with another episode of Pat's Daily, brought to you by our good friends at PrizePicks and GameTime. Today, we're coming at you with another position preview. This time, we are talking about linebackers, all right? Now, this is probably kind of like defensive line, one of the deepest position groups, also because a few of these guys qualify also as defensive linemen, but with the Patriots team, they move them all over the place, so there's a little bit of ambiguity there. So, Mike, we already dug into safeties and special teams last week. Let the people know what you think overall about the Patriots linebacker position heading into training camp.
Yeah, we kind of talked about it a little bit with the safeties, where there's not much to worry about on the defensive side of the football with the Patriots. We think safety is probably their best room, and in my opinion, linebacker is probably number two. There's two real, solid guys down the middle. We talk about Jawaan Bentley, who, seventh year in the league. I think he was a fourth-time captain last year, going on his fifth this year in all likelihood. So a guy who's under contract, has notched 100 tackles in each of the last 3 seasons, had a career high in sacks last year with 4.5. So he seems to almost be getting better with age. He was a guy who early on in his career, he was kind of, I thought anyway, from at first as a fan and then starting to cover the team, someone who could have been like a fringe roster player early on, who's just developed into like a really solid linebacker down the middle. So, a guy that the Patriots linebacker room can really hang their hat on in Bentley. And then Jahlani Tavai, who I'll go on my soapbox on Tavai in a minute when we get to it. But signs his contract this year. We talked about it, a guy who's just gotten better and better every step of the way with the Patriots. So he's another guy who is inked now for another 3 years, who is solid for them. When you get to those, you talked about it, defensive lineman-ish players, the outside linebackers, the edge rushers, right? I have them looped in as linebackers, your Uches and Matthew Judon and Anfernee Jennings. But the one real question mark right here, and again, we'll talk about it later on too, is Matthew Judon, his contract situation, his standing with the team. But they re-signed Uche, they re-signed Jennings, Uche to a 1-year deal, Jennings to a 3-year deal. And those guys have been, solid contributors over the last couple seasons. Uche dipped a little bit last year, but had a really good 2022. So we'll see what he can bring in the new scheme. And Jennings, man, he's a guy too who he's been on my fringe cut list, roster projections, 53, 54th player the last couple seasons. He was inactive in week 1 last year, a healthy scratch. And then he turns out to be, really one of the better players on the defense. So this room is only looking up. Also, Raekwon McMillan, Sione Takitaki was a guy who was brought in this year, and then it's kind of rounded out with some of the practice squad candidates and, your Steel Chambers and Joe Giles Harris and guys like that. But top down, one of the best position groups on the team for sure.
Yeah, especially those off-ball linebackers. I feel like that is one of the deepest spots on the Patriots roster, especially considering, they usually play Jawaan Bentley and Jahlani Tavai on those early down defenses. And honestly, I think they're one of the most underrated duos at that position in football.
I agree.
They can take on offensive linemen. They can also make them miss. They know what they're supposed to do in coverage. Jahlani Tavai over the past couple years has really stood out in coverage, gotten his hands on a few passes, showing his instincts and his range. And they're not the fastest guys, obviously, but I think people underrate how important it is to just be smart and be able to diagnose quickly at linebacker. Because you can run a 4-3, but if you don't know where you're going, you can't beat guys to the spot, or you end up taking false steps. That makes you slow no matter what. And these guys are consistently around the ball. Huge reason the Patriots had an elite run defense last year. And then behind them, Sione Takitaki, again, we were pretty excited about that one when he signed. Not a player that's going to blow you away necessarily, and obviously you'd expect him to be more of a rotational backup kind of guy, but still a really solid player who gives you that Takitaki type – that Jahlani Tavai kind of versatility. Raekwon McMillan, somebody who also we'll get into him a little bit more later on, but a guy who I think is their most athletic inside linebacker by a country mile now, especially with Mac Wilson no longer on the team. And the Patriots clearly value him, whether it's as a special team or rotational player, because he's gotten hurt with season-ending injuries before the season twice since signing with the Patriots, and they made sure to keep him around both times. And then, like you mentioned, with that outside linebacker spot, obviously Matthew Judon. We already did a podcast where we touched on the whole contract situation, so check that out on CLNS Media or Patriots Press Pass on YouTube if you want to know more. But obviously, if he's on the team, that gives you a huge boost because he's someone you know what you're going to get out of him. Playmaker, vocal leader. Anfernee Jennings, breakout season last year, one of the best run defenders in football. Really excited to see what he does. Probably going to cut into some of Judon's early down snaps. And like you mentioned, you hope Joshua Uche can return to form. I'll say Oshane Ximines, a guy who they signed kind of after free agency had really died down. Someone I think could be a sneaky contributor for this team and a dark horse to make the roster as a special teamer and rotational piece. But without further ado, let's get into some of these categories. So we'll start with sleepers. Who are the Patriots fans not talking about enough heading into 2024?
So before I get into mine, I kind of want to add something to what you just said. And he's a sleeper also in my book, is Sione Takitaki, because we didn't see him much at all in the offseason program. So I think when he was signed, it was, oh, he's an Elliott Wolf guy from Cleveland. They loved him. You know, you talk about, he had like a rave review about him in his press conference. And then it's like, oh, this could be a really solid contributor. Then we haven't seen him in the offseason program. So I think the talk about him has kind of fizzled off. And I think he could be a really solid piece once this defense, once he gets healthy and once the defense kind of all comes together through training camp and the regular season. But my sleeper is Jahlani Tavai. And it's kind of an indictment on myself. And we've talked about it on the podcast. We talked about it when we did our reaction podcast to when he signed his contract. But Tavai's a guy who I really was not a fan of when he first got here. They signed him off, I think it was off Detroit's practice squad in 2021. He played the rest of the season. And then 2022, look, it was from my eyes, and I think a lot of other people's eyes, he just didn't look great in camp. He looked slow. He looked like just slow reaction time, but then slow physically. And I just, I kept saying, I kept talking about it with Barth on our podcast that I don't think he's going to make the team. And Barth kept telling me, listen to Bill Belichick, listen to Bill Belichick. He doesn't lie. He's saying he's going to be a part of the team. And he was. And he made the team. I didn't like it. He had an okay 2022. And then last year in 2023, he really started to shine. And we talked about it too before, but that slowness, I think it had to do with understanding the defense and understanding, what he has to react to. And he just has a knack now to find the football, both in coverage and as a run defender. Let's see, I have some stats in front of me. He was second on the Patriots in tackles last season, career high 110. He had highs in tackles for loss with 5, and he also had 2 interceptions. So, look, I'm done sleeping on Tavai. And maybe I say who we're sleeping on. Maybe it was me sleeping on him for so long, and I think kind of I'm late to the party. I'm late to the Tavai train, but I'm really excited for what he can bring this season, getting his money, new year, more comfortability in the defense rather than what they want to do. So I think it's time to give this guy his flowers. Again, I think I may be too late, but Tavai's a really good player, and I'm excited to see what he can do this year.
And in your defense, I think I read someone who covers Detroit mention that he lost weight since he was on the Lions, so that probably has something to do with it. And even like Jahlani mentioned while speaking to us last year that being with the Patriots has made him a better player. So really awesome to see him have a huge career rebound. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's fair to say he lived up. Second-round pick as a linebacker, a guy who plays a ton of snaps for you. He's productive, plays a lot of different roles. Literally on those every down kind of packages like their nickel and their base. He's almost
he looked like a bust at the beginning. Like you said, he was a second-round pick, and I said they signed him off the Detroit practice squad, but now that I'm thinking about it, I'm pretty sure he was cut by Detroit after his second season, after his second training camp, and then the Patriots ended up bringing him in. So a guy who looked like a bust early and now is starting to live back up to that second round talent.
Yeah, so I'm kind of going to split this one a little bit just because I feel like it's two guys that deserve to be mentioned. Sure. One is Anfernee Jennings. Like I said, I feel like no one ever talks about him, and it's partially because he's a run defender. It's not sexy, but being able to have someone who makes the kind of impact he did, where it's not necessarily like a Devon Gottschall, where he's eating space and you don't really see his impact as much in the stats unless you really do some digging. Anfernee Jennings was getting stops at a regular rate. Also, like tackles for loss, making those kind of plays that put you behind on second down. That sets the defense up for success because that's when you get to dictate what you want to do, what kind of coverages and personnel you want to play with. So I think Anfernee Jennings is someone who deserves a lot more credit because he's also, as I kind of mentioned earlier, going to be cutting into Matthew Judon snaps on first downs because you have Jahlani Tavai on that one side of the, in their 5-man fronts as an outside linebacker. Usually it's going to be Jennings because you paid him. He's a young guy. You want to make sure you're getting that value and giving him an ability to affect the game as a run defender. So he's my first. The second is Oshane Ximines. Again, we didn't really talk about him a whole lot once he signed, and it made sense. It was really late in the process. It kind of seemed like he was just a camp body. But one, he has experience with Drew Wilkins, which is huge. I think they worked together for 2 seasons under Wink when he was the defensive coordinator for New York. He played a lot more in 2022 than 2023, but in that 2022 tape, you saw a really good run defender, so at least someone who can contribute on early downs. I think he's got a little something as a pass rusher as well. Kind of had some flashes with like cross chops and things like that, more than you'd get from like an Anfernee Jennings, let's say. And he can play off the line of scrimmage as well. And he seems like someone who is off a lot of people's rosters. I had him on, and that's because I think between the versatility in terms of alignment and what his role is going to be, he's someone that not is just a dark horse to make the roster, but potentially be someone who works his way into the rotation. So especially if something happens with Matthew Judon and they can't figure something out, I would not sleep on his ability to make the team.
Judon will be the key there, I think. But also, like you mentioned, you already said I was going to add to it, but you mentioned it, the familiarity with Drew Wilkins and like what they want to do at the outside linebacker position. If you know, Wilkins comes in, he works with Covington, and they figure out kind of how they want to scheme it up. And he knows, oh, I can use Oshane for this, and he can do this. And he understands what we want to do. That brings so much more to the table. It's something we'll talk about later on when we do tight ends, but like Austin Hooper with Alex Van Pelt, Jacoby Brissett with Alex Van Pelt, having that familiarity with what you want to run, I think can really help because it's July 25th or July 11th right now. Camp starts the 25th. You have to get a roster in, a little over a month later. There's not a lot of time to pick things up. So I think that's huge. And I think that's a good point as to what makes him in as a sleeper.
All right, we got much more to talk about, but first, quick word from our friends at PrizePicks. Be right back. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. With the NBA Finals over, the hoops action doesn't stop on PrizePicks. Women's basketball is just heating up, with stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese looking to make names for themselves, alongside greats like Breanna Stewart and Asia Wilson. You can earn up to 100 times your cash watching them ball out. PrizePicks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. I made my first $10 deposit and received an instant $10 bonus. If you have the skills, you can play for a shot at turning your $10 into $1,000. I've got Caitlin Clark for more than 3.5 3-points made and Breanna Stewart for more than 23 points. For baseball, I've got Kyle Schwarber for more than 9-hitter fantasy score and Bryce Miller for more than 4 pitcher strikeouts. Download the app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, buddy. Surprise cut candidates. I feel like this is another position group where there's not a whole lot of candidates. So This one's kind of easy. Who you got?
So I'm going Raekwon McMillan. And I don't know if it's necessarily a surprise because he's a guy that we don't really talk about. But I think his standing on the roster and what they've done with him since they signed him on that infamous 2021 signing spree the Patriots went on with, your Kendrick Bournes and Hunter Henrys, and Raekwon McMillan was kind of looped into that, a guy who was a second-round pick out of Alabama. He played with Miami for a couple seasons. And then he comes up here, and it was like, oh, they're getting a solid linebacker, and then he tears his ACL, and he misses a whole season. And then he plays, I have it written down, he played 250 snaps in 2022, a lot of special teams reps there. And then going into last season, he tore his Achilles and was out for the year again. But through all of that, they kept him around. And there's all these, these stories about like Gerard Mayo and Steve Belichick, how those guys used to always grind film even when Mayo was hurt and he was always in the building. That was kind of Raekwon McMillan last year. They've talked about it. Steve Belichick mentioned him. A lot of his teammates mentioned him as a guy who was almost a de facto coach and was in the film room. And he wasn't just by the wayside while he was on IR. He was really involved. So that being said, I think they appreciate what they have in McMillan on the roster, somebody who is clearly a quick learner and can, regurgitate that kind of stuff. And what they liked what he had on special teams in 2022. But at the end of the day, if you're a 28-year-old linebacker who's already missed 2 full seasons because of injury and you don't show out in these next 6-7 weeks, like I just mentioned, it's kind of hard to envision them giving you a roster spot again. It's easy to put a guy on IR because it doesn't waste a roster spot and you can just give him, free rehab and free food and free training and stuff, where when it's a 53-man roster, it's so much different. So I think McMillan has to really show out from July 25th on in order to make the team. And it's a surprise cut because of how much they've invested in him already. But I could see him missing the roster when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I totally agree. When you look at Juwan Bentley, Jahlani Tavai, and Sione Takitaki, they're pretty much roster locks. And then no one else really in that group. In terms of the off-ball guys, would you expect to even make the roster. Then again, Judon, Jennings, Uche, they're going to be there. And Ximines, no one's expecting anyway. So Raekwon McMillan definitely makes the most sense. I like him as like your fourth linebacker. Again, he is the most athletic guy. Now, again, another serious injury. You never know how somebody's going to bounce back. There is that to take into consideration.
Right.
He's a smart guy. He had so much athleticism. Even if he takes a step back, he's still probably, one of your faster guys, one of your rangier guys. He did have some issues in 2022, I remember, in terms of his discipline and instincts. Like, he kind of got pulled out of plays every once in a while, but he did have some impact plays as well. So you're hoping maybe being off the field hurts, but another year of experience and at least like looking at schemes and things like that, maybe that helps. I don't know. But yeah, if he gets cut, I wouldn't be shocked, although I do like him as a potential fourth linebacker on the team. All right, that one was easy. Now let's go to trade candidates. I'm sure everyone's going to be absolutely stunned by your pick here.
That's how I started the segment in my article. Isn't it obvious? It's obviously Matthew Judon. I mean, look, he's all over social media. He's posting the SpongeBob memes. He's saying that he doesn't think he's going to get extended. Like, it seems like there's a little bit of writing on the wall here with what's going to happen with Matthew Judon. Now, we talked about it when we spoke with Claudia during our mailbag, and we kind of hit on this. But in my opinion, if Judon isn't in your plans past this season, then you should just cut your losses and trade him. Like, if you want to extend him and you want him to be a part of the long-term rebuild, keep him around, sign him, but don't just give him a pay bump this year just for him to walk again and get nothing for him, right? Like, it's like you're paying him more money, 2024. I keep saying it with a caveat, but it doesn't really matter. This is a team building for 2025 and beyond. So if you can get, draft capital for him to continue this rebuild and not have to give him instead an extra pay bump and limit your salary this year just for him to leave in 2024 or after 2024, I think you try and move on from him. He's a guy who's coming off injury. Now, granted, he's healthy and he's been working out, and he was a sort of a half walkthrough participant during the offseason program. I don't think that was due to injury. I think that was due to the contract situation. And he's been vocal. He wants a new deal. Henry McKenna reported it the other day. And so, look, I love Judon. He's a good guy to have in the locker room. He's a fun, he's a fun presence, and he's a really good football player. But at the end of the day, I just don't see his value in the course of this new Patriots regime and rebuild. I think with the contract situation, and you could kind of maybe spin him off to a Super Bowl contender and let him go get his trophy. So that's the reason. I don't really think there's any other trade candidate in the room either. So Matthew Judon is the obvious one that I think realistically could be moved by the end of this.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And this discussion really just comes down to the business versus what we'd like to see. Like, 100%. I don't think anybody's saying, like, actually, no, there are some people that are saying it. I think it's ridiculous. But,
yes.
I don't think anybody wants to get rid of Judon in terms of, like, the on-field leader, the playmaker, and all of that. But there is also the business side that you have to understand. I'm not going to beat this one over the head.
Yeah.
We all want to see Judon come back. He's one of the only every down difference makers they have in that defensive front. But at the end of the day, injury, age, the fact that his role isn't going to be as expansive as it probably was in previous seasons. The writing's kind of on the wall if things break down. Like, you'll understand why it happened and maybe why the team doesn't want to match him, where he wants to be. But also, I do wonder what his value is to other teams. I've been saying that I don't think you're going to get, great compensation, even though compensation at all is still good. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how this gets worked out. I feel like the team will really try to meet him halfway. I don't think it's going to be like a Gottschall. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I feel like Gottschall's going to have a much harder time getting what he wants than will Judon. But yeah, man, it's we'll see.
Well, I look at it from a player's and a coach's perspective, and not really the business side of football, like just product on the field. Obviously, the teammates, Judon himself, and I guess the coaches obviously are going to want Matthew Judon around because, like you said, he is a great player. He hasn't really been hurt all that much during his time in New England. Obviously, last year was a different story, but when he's on the field, he's played well. So they're going to want him to win games. But again, when you look at what they have to do front office wise and what the decisions Elliott Wolf has to make salary cap wise and with just building for the future, again, I'm kind of beating it over the head too. But 2024. Doesn't really matter, I don't think. I think they need to look farther than that. So if you could gain a fourth round pick in 2025 or 2026, that might be better off than having Judon in having 15 sacks this year in a season that you're not really expecting much to really happen. So,
yep. Same page, brother. All right.
Yeah.
We're going to get to our grades and who's in and out on Mike's roster projections. But first, quick words from our friends at GameTime. Be right back.
Nothing says summer quite like a live baseball game. And whenever I want to check out a Red Sox game at Fenway, I'm using GameTime, the best place for last-minute deals on tickets. GameTime is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. With GameTime, it's as easy as finding the game you want to attend, getting a view of the entire stadium to see what prices look like in different areas, and they actually do you a favor and show you both the cheapest tickets available and the best deals. You can also get the view from the seat that you pick, and between their lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, and job loss protection, there's really no better option than GameTime. And with GameTime's lowest price guarantee, the app will actually credit you 110% of the difference if you find a cheaper ticket elsewhere. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right, buddy, roster projection time. Who is in and who is out among the Patriots linebacking core?
Alrighty, so I got 7 backers making the team, and it's Jawon Bentley, Anfernee Jennings. I do have Matthew Judon on here for now. Raekwon McMillan, I do have him sneaking on the roster, despite I think him being a surprise cut. And then Sione Takitaki, Jahlani Tavai, and Josh Uche. So it's pretty chalky. No real surprises there. Even though I think Judon could be traded, and I wouldn't be surprised if McMillan's cut. For now, these are the guys I have. And then off the roster, practice squad candidates in Steel Chambers, Christian Ellis, Joe Giles Harris, rookie Jontre Hunter, and Oshane Ximines. If when things happen with Judon and McMillan and there's, you're looking for those 52nd and 53rd players, I think Ximines has an opportunity to make the team. And I think Christian Ellis does as well, potentially as a special teamer. We'll see how that happens and how it plays out during camp and how, they figure out their kickoffs and kickoff returns and things like that. But for now, that's what I have. It's those 7 players.
I pretty much had the same thing, except I had Oshane Ximines making it. Another guy from Queens, actually. We're from around the same area, so
nice.
I got to show him some love. But also professionally, I do think what he brings in terms of versatility, reliability against the run, really being able to do, again, on the ball, off the ball, being able to contribute on every down if you need him to, and the special teams ability, I feel like that's enough that he really does have a shot at making this roster. But outside of that, I feel like this one's pretty straight cut. That's the only one where I feel like people might teeter. Honestly, I don't think people are teetering. I think I'm the only one who thinks Oshane's going to make the roster, but I will stand on that business until I am proven wrong. And then Steel Chambers is a guy who I think has a real shot at making the practice squad. Jontre Hunter, also, EJ Snyder of the Bootleg Football Podcast, he was high on him as well. A really athletic guy, kind of fits the mold of, in the pre-draft process, they were looking at a lot of undersized but really fast linebackers. And Jontre Hunter kind of fits that mold. So those are 2 guys to watch. Christian Ellis, more of a pure special teamer. I don't see how he makes the roster with so many talented players who can contribute on their side of the ball and on special teams. Joe Giles Harris, practice squad guy. I don't think there's a whole lot of mystery there either. All right, final grade for this position. What'd you give him?
Yeah, I'm going A- right now. I think even if they do end up parting ways with Matthew Judon, this is still a room that's set up for a ton of success. I think they could even get themselves to, an A towards midseason if Tavai takes that another leap that we think he will, and if Josh Uche can get back to form. He talked about it. I think you asked him about it, in the offseason program when we spoke with them, what happened last year compared to the year before, and he just said that the way they used me, and he hopes that being here in a different, similar but different scheme with what Covington and they want to do with the, being more aggressive and stuff. If they can find a better way to use him, that he can also improve upon his 2023. So if those 2 guys make leaps, I think they can be an A. Right now, just with the mysteries surrounding Judon's situation and everything else, I still go A-, but it's the second strongest room on the team outside of safety for sure.
I'll give it an A just because I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. Like, we don't know. Like, Judon is still coming to practice. I think it's more of a stretch to say he won't be on the roster than he will. Definitely. And I also think the fact that he can be more of a, not really a role player, I think that's maybe laying it on a little bit too thick. But the fact that there will be more of a rotation to keep him fresh, I really like that. Joshua Uche, another guy I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt just because he wasn't even bad last season, really. If you look at the numbers and the film, he wasn't terrible. It was just the gap lane integrity. That was one thing I'd really like to see him work on. And you could see that he wasn't really able to do what he did best a lot of the time because he had so many contained responsibilities. Yeah. So I think that he really can get back to his form where he can beat guys outside and inside. Last year it was really just inside. He wasn't able to really threaten the edge as much as I think he should be able to. Anfernee Jennings, like I said, I really love him. And I love the depth, both on the edge and inside. I really think that this team stacks up well. Again, Ja'Whaun Bentley and Jahlani Tavai, one of the most underrated linebacking duos. And people don't really talk about linebackers as an impact position, but when you look at all the best defenses in the NFL, you're rarely, if ever, going to find one that doesn't have at least one 100%. Very good to elite linebacker. Like, those are the playmakers on your defense. I think Luke Kuechly is even, obviously has some position bias, but I think he's even mentioned that, you need a great linebacker to have a great defense because, the defensive line does their thing and they create the disruption, but the linebackers are the ones who a lot of the time stop plays from getting worse. It also can get everybody, in the 100%.
Right. They're the leader of the defense. They're the center. They're the green dot guys. They're the ones who, make the whole thing run. So even if it's more, sometimes more mental than physical, like it's such an important position. And I think you're right. It's underrated in terms of again, how important they are to the team.
Yeah, especially in this Patriots scheme where they're asked to do so many things and you actually have guys that can't execute it. So, that's going to be an A for me. Now, done with linebackers. Let the people know what they can look forward to next week.
All right, we're going to hit the tight ends. We have 4 positions remaining. We have tight ends, wide receivers, cornerbacks, and then quarterbacks. Quarterbacks is going to be the week of training camp, just the Monday before, and then we'll hit everything else next week. So I think, I don't know when this podcast is going to post, but we'll have tight ends up on Friday. We'll hit the other 2 the week before camp, and then quarterbacks after that. So tight ends, look forward to next. As we round this thing out, Taylor, we only have 1 full week left until Patriots training camp starts. Can you believe it?
I can't believe it, but honestly, I'm excited. I've been cooped up in the house too long. I need to get out on the fields and watch an actual football. Looking forward to it, buddy. So thank you all for watching, as always. Now, until we get to the next positions remaining, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We will see you next time. Peace, y'all.